Deputy Harris.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ryan, and your colleagues for being here today. At the outset, I suppose I really want to acknowledge and thank Enterprise Ireland and your staff for the tremendous work that you have been doing over the last number of years, but particularly, I suppose, over the last particularly crucial number of years for our country as we attempt, I suppose, to rebuild our economy, but not just to rebuild it, to actually recreate it. And I think when you read through your own annual report and accounts for 2011 and the statistics contained within that and the information contained within that, I think it is clear to see that the economy is now repositioning itself from an economy built on selling houses and property to each other to one built on Irish companies actually producing its wares and selling those wares abroad. And I think great credit must go to Enterprise Ireland and your staff for the success you've had. And it's quite clear from the figures in the 2011 accounts that you've had significant success in recent years, with 15.2 billion being exported by your client companies in 2011, and that's at a level that was higher than the pre-recession levels of 2008. Equally, your new export sales from Irish client companies, 2.14 billion in 2011, was your highest ever level of gain. So I want to acknowledge that at the outset. I also want to pay tribute to the work that you've been doing, linking in with businesses and expositions. I attended recently the Creative Ireland Creative Expo in the RDS, and I thought the presence of Enterprise Ireland there and linking in with what have traditionally been very small local businesses involved in the production of crafts, linking in with them and talking to them about the potential for their wares to be promoted on the global stage was very encouraging. So I'd just like to put that on the record at the start. But there are, I suppose, a number of kind of questions that we need to get to the bottom of, just to try to establish that everything is going well, and if there's anything that we can improve on, because we're depending so much on Enterprise Ireland delivering. We obviously need to be very careful that a complacency doesn't set in. And one of the figures that really struck me when I was reading through your annual report and the various documents was the cost per job, and the figure that you put on the cost per creating a job. And I note in your annual report on page 7, from 1996 to 2002, the cost per job was stated to be €11,761. From 2000 to 2006, it was €4,385. And from 2005 to 2011, it was €12,024. So I suppose if you're looking at this from a removed position, the first question that springs to mind is, why is it now more expensive to create a job coming in at €12,024 per job than the €4,385 that it was for the 2000 to 2006 level? If we just start with that one. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Maybe to give you maybe some background in relation to that, maybe I'll ask Paddy to address that, if you would comment on that.
Chairman, Deputy, the cost per job is calculated by FORFOS, and the same formula applies for IDA and EI and the county enterprise boards and that. And basically it takes in all costs associated with grant giving and that, but also it takes in the income we received from sale and disposal of investments over that 7-year rolling period as such. And that's compared with the actual jobs sustained or created and sustained right up to that particular year, which we're dealing with. The current year we're talking about was in 2011, I beg your pardon, at 12,024 and that. I guess one of the issues that really brought about the very low cost per job in the years, say, from 2004 to 2007, was we had substantial own resource income in the years 2000, from the years 2000 until 2001 and that was a mitigating factor in reducing the cost per job during that period as such. Since then, obviously, we've been getting income from sale and disposal of investments, but it hasn't been to the same extent as in those particular years as such. I might also add that we're currently, as part of our investment policy and strategy, we're looking at the cost per job with each investment we make now for each company as such. So that is taken in as an important factor when deciding how to support a company in that. Obviously, we want to make the investment at the lowest cost per job possible. However, we have to be mindful of the state of each individual company and how it's operating, and that the actual support we give them meets the needs of the company at that point in time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a useful clarification. I'd like to move on just to the action plan for jobs. I think the action plan for jobs has played an important role in keeping all state agencies focused and kind of coordinated in relation to what we can do for job creation. But of the 270 actions in the action plan for jobs, you guys are responsible for in around 100 of them, which is obviously a huge proportion of them. I suppose, firstly, I'm wondering how many of the 100 have actually been achieved and are ticked off as done. You might just outline to the committee what you would view maybe as some of the most important ones that you were tasked with this year. And also, I suppose, if any organisation is given 100 new objectives or tasks to meet in a year, one can only imagine that must have put significant pressures on your own resources. And you might just give us an overview of how you dealt with that as well.
Through the Chair, I hope you'd find this helpful, Deputy. The Action Plan for Jobs contained over 270 individual actions to be delivered in 2012, spanning all government departments and 36 state agencies. The 270 actions were broken down into quarterly milestones. Enterprise Ireland had responsibility for more than 100 of these, representing a third of the action programme. Progress reports on the delivery of all of the milestones were published at the end of each quarter. Details of all actions delivered are available in these progress reports published on the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation's website. The fourth progress report on the Action Plan for Jobs 2012 is due to be published shortly and will demonstrate a number of Enterprise Ireland's actions which concluded in the last quarter of the year. Some significant objectives that were realised, including the launch of the second call of the Innovation Fund Ireland, the development capital funds, support for a record number of high potential startups, the establishment of technology centres such as that in cloud computing, and support for more than 200 significant company projects involving investments of over 500,000. Enterprise Ireland delivered in full and on time the vast majority of the more than 100 actions assigned to it by the action plan. The actual figure was 97%. Of course, we are operating in a challenging period with regard to resources, and I can give you details of the 3% that's missing if you would like that, Deputy. We are now looking forward to cooperating very closely with Minister Bruton in relation to the implementation of the Action Plan for Jobs in 2013. With regard to the question you asked in relation to resources, it has put an enormous strain on the resources of the agency. Over the last 18 months, 217 staff out of 742 have been reassigned to new duties in order to meet the demands and needs of our client companies and the requirements under the Action Plan for Jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Another issue in your annual report refers to your international offices, and I think Enterprise Ireland has 29, if I'm correct. I just want to try to get a handle on this because we have a lot of people that come before this committee, it's the IDA, the Department of Foreign Affairs, yourselves, who all have international offices. And I know it's actually been a suggestion of the chairman's before, which I think is a very valid one, that there is clearly a need for a more integrated approach, and can we actually start having kind of nearly Irish offices that do multiple functions abroad. And I'm just wondering where Enterprise Ireland, well, firstly your thoughts on that, Mr. Ryan, I suppose, and where Enterprise Ireland is at in relation to that. So what sort of linkage is there between yourselves and our embassies and the Department of Foreign Affairs, and is there a scope for a more integrated approach? I suppose I would certainly have the view, and I think it would be shared by other colleagues, that we need our embassies to very much be trade missions as well. And you might just give us an overview in relation to that. And also, have you any plans to open any more international offices?
We do have a network of offices overseas, Deputy. And currently in those offices there would be a staff of 134 and a half full-time equivalent staff in those offices. Where EI has overseas offices, the objective is to maximise the effectiveness, and they are co-located with the Department of Foreign Affairs. Now, I welcome actually the opportunity to address this issue because I think there's a bit of disinformation going around. And of our 20-odd overseas offices, 15 of them are currently co-located with an embassy or a consulate. Okay. 6 are co-located with other government agencies. And the balance then can't be located really beside an embassy. And I'll give you an example of that. In Australia, our office is in Sydney, which is the business capital, but the government capital is Canberra, and there's no reason for us to have an office in Canberra. In Brazil, our office is in São Paulo. You know, the government office is in Brasilia. You know, so and that's where the embassies will be located, in Canberra and in Brasilia. But so it doesn't make sense to have us located there. And then perhaps in India, both ourselves and IDA have a joint office now in Mumbai. That's the business capital, whereas the government capital really is New Delhi. So there are business reasons why, for a small number of them, why we wouldn't be co-located, but we actually are co-located with 15 of them right now. And the policy is very clearly, first of all, we co-locate with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, if at all possible.
Okay.
Secondly, if we can't do that, we co-locate with IDA or other government, and it's only because of business demands that we have a small number of offices overseas that we don't address. Now, you mentioned the issue earlier in relation to resources, and we have permission to have a full staff complement overseas of 149.5 people based overseas. However, in recent months we've been working with our parent department and with Minister Bruton in relation to, we have submitted a plan to increase our overseas representations by 20 posts. These would be people who would be employed out in the field, not expatriates who would be sent from Ireland to these markets. We believe that plan has been endorsed by Minister Bruton. It is currently waiting consideration by DEPR, and we believe that there's an opportunity to gain up to, by 2015, up to about $250 million in extra exports from this resource, which we estimate conservatively would create about 1,200 jobs in Ireland. Now, the areas where we want to put those activities in, or increased resources into, are, we're very strong in markets like the UK, near Europe, Australia, North America, but Canada and the United States. But we have to, they're not the economies that are growing fastest now, so we have to be where the action is. And we've set out a plan that would see us put additional resources, these across the 20 people now, into Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Southeast Asia, Korea, GCC, specifically Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Oman, will bring us into Turkey and Japan as well. We have to go where the business opportunity is now, and we hope that DEPR will view this submission positively.
I'm delighted to hear you say that, because obviously we had the visit of the then Chinese Vice President to Ireland last year, and a number of reciprocal visits by Irish ministers to China. And you might just, when I finish this question, you might just give us a kind of update on what's actually happened. Has anything happened in a kind of tangible sense in relation to China and Ireland and our exports since those visits? I think that would be very useful. The other issue, I'm very pleased to hear of your very proactive situation in relation to the co-location with our embassies in the first instance. But I suppose what I would like to know is, and you might just explain this to me as someone who has no understanding of it, how are our Enterprise Ireland offices interacting on a daily basis with our diplomatic missions in various countries? So, for example, our ambassador to a certain country, what sort of linkage is there between that ambassador and Enterprise Ireland? I suppose what we all want to know is our diplomats, many of whom do a wonderful job, but do cost an awful lot of money to have out there, that we're absolutely maximising the service from the point of view of the economy as well as just broader diplomatic issues. So I'd just be very interested in your take on that.
Okay. Again, through the chair, I think the visit of Vice President Xi Jinping changed everything in relation to China. It's fair to say that prior to that visit, not many Chinese people would know where Ireland was. Okay, we have to deal with reality as well in Enterprise Ireland, and since that, a huge sway of people. It's probably one of the biggest coups that the country has actually brought off in recent times. That he would start out in the United States and then travel to Ireland was an enormous coup, and a coup which many of our European partners would only love to have had the opportunity to have. We had him here in Ireland for approximately 3 to 4 days, which gives an enormous opportunity, and the press coverage in China was phenomenal in relation to the visit. There's a good chance now, if you mention Ireland in China now, people know what you're talking about. That's the degree of the step forward that has happened. It is difficult for us in China because not that many people, I suppose traditionally, the Irish didn't emigrate to that part of the world. So the Irish diaspora is not strong in China, and therefore that sort of recognition and the recognition of such a visit is very important to us. We are very closely working with our colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which we report to on trade matters. And that's in great evidence in relation to the work of the Export Council, where we also report into the Export Council. And I suppose if I was to stick with China, Dermot Kelleher there would be Ireland's lead person, Ambassador Kelleher, in China today. He's short to be replaced by Ambassador O'Sullivan from Paris. And there is an integrated plan for the top 25 countries in the world between all of the agencies, now coordinated through our own partner department, DJEI, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So the left hand knows exactly what the right hand is doing. There are commitments given in that, and the ambassador is the lead person in overseeing and bringing that team together. And it is working increasingly well. There's a huge benefit to our companies in relation to being introduced in the market and help to be introduced in the market at the level of an ambassador. It gives them increased credibility.
Just a couple more quick questions. Our exports grew, I think, by around 5% in 2012, and we're at roughly twice the world average. So clearly we're doing well on that front, but obviously we need to have an honest discussion about what we need to do going forward. And I suppose two questions that I'd have for you, Mr. Ryan, are what do you see as the main challenges that currently face Ireland's cost base as an exporting country? And secondly, have you identified any skill gaps or capacity gaps? We've heard about them from employers in terms of actually locating in Ireland in terms of FDI, but in terms of exporting, have you identified any skill gaps or capacity gaps? And if so, what do you think needs to be done to address them?
Okay. I think in relation to the first issue, which is the cost base, I think we're a developed economy now as opposed to a developing economy. In a developing economy, you would track very tightly your cost base. In a developed economy such as Ireland now, you need to really track your level of innovation, because overseas buyers look at Ireland as a source of sophisticated products and services. So in the past, they would have looked to places like Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, Japan, Switzerland for these types of products. Ireland is now on that list. So the companies that are making these export gains worldwide are IP-rich, highly innovative, and dedicated to active research and development. Okay, so and I think it's the innovation that's making the difference in the numbers, actually, and the competence of the capability of the companies. Of course, we're concerned about the cost base, particularly in relation to manufacturing. One of the things that happened in 2012 is our manufacturing base remains steady. And we are keenly focused on that in relation to lean manufacturing initiative that we have in working with our companies. There is ground to be made up there in relation to the role of efficiency. If you're not efficient at home, you won't be competitive overseas, as simple as that. So you have to address efficiencies in the plants, and we'll continue to work with our companies on that whole lean manufacturing approach. In terms of the skills gaps, we would have exactly the same pressures as IDA would have in relation to skills. We would have vacancies currently in relation to computer science graduates, particularly software people who have 5 to 8 years experience. We would have gaps in relation to semiconductor design engineers, and we would have perhaps some gaps on the engineering side. Perhaps it's a nice kind of problem to have to some extent, but what we've done in Enterprise Ireland is that last year we're setting up, I should say this year in the early start, but we're setting up a small skills unit within Enterprise Ireland to focus on the skill needs of our clients. And that we're not in a position where we're supporting companies, that we're actually financially supporting vacancies in concept as opposed to jobs. You know, we want the jobs to be filled when people get approval for jobs. And we're working closely with the Department of Education and Skills. There has been a very good reaction from that department in relation to the conversion courses for people who had considerable skills in the construction sector, architects, engineers, quantity surveyors. They tend to be very good at maths. And good at maths is the key discipline required for really to transfer successfully into a career in computer science. And the first of those people are now coming off that, I think a Springboard program is the name of it. And the reaction back from our clients to date is very positive in relation to the quality. Well, our view of that was, well, why wouldn't it be? These people are very well qualified and very well experienced in business and experienced in life as well, because they're not graduates coming out just of university. They've been around for a while, both overseas and at home, and therefore they can add value to the companies concerned. But it is an area of focus for us. It's an area where we continue to liaise with IDA and with our parent department and with education and skills.
Okay.
That's maybe.
I mean, one of the biggest problems we all hear and we all know about is obviously the issue of companies and businesses, whether they want to export or whether they want to just establish accessing credit. And I know that Enterprise Ireland have undertaken some work in this area, and it was reported in the Sunday Business Post that you were in talks with banks about developing a new credit line specifically for technology and export companies. And I think you've set up a banking relations department as well. You might just brief the committee on how those conversations with the banks have gone in relation to that credit line, and also in relation to your banking relations department, in terms of measurable successes, how successful you think it's been to date.
Give you the man who heads that up now is here, Neil O'Donnell, and to give you a comprehensive answer, I'll ask Neil to comment on that.
Sure. Deputy, we set up the Banking Relations Department in 2008 in response to the credit crunch, and the immediate issue was the access to credit of companies that we were dealing with and who were under considerable pressure at that time. The team consists of 3 experienced executives, and we work with our front line as they are working with individual companies. Issues of credit arise in various contexts, and the team then interact with contexts that they've established with the banks. In particular, we have established 3 relationships with the 3 primary banks, that's AIB, Bank of Ireland and Ulster Bank, where we have a central contact point. We have talked about the kind of issues our companies face, and that central contact point is responsible for helping us to introducing us to the individual bank account manager who will be dealing with the individual company. Obviously, with the agreement of the company. We would then engage with the bank on the particular issues that might be facing the company in relation to bank credit and the need for the company to get particular facilities. We would deal with, I would say, each year approximately 150 companies on that basis. In 2011 there would have been, and that would in some companies would include a number of multiple interactions if they were dealing with a number of different banks. So in 2011 we had 190 interactions in that context, and over half of those clients that we worked with would have got new facilities. Some would have got restructured and confirmed facilities. There would have been some declines, approximately 20%, and then in some cases the company might have been offered a revised banking loan, but would have found it not appropriate to their particular situation. So that's if you like, our intervention on immediate issues in relation to companies that we work with through the banking relations team. As we got more involved through the years 08, 09 and 10, we realised that actually there were some more bigger issues involved. The issues that are common to all companies in the economy, such as the lack of experience in the banks in actually dealing with business plans, cash flow lending, and that kind of issue. The challenges that would be in terms of requests for collateral and so on. The reality of debt overhang on a personal or a business basis, particularly coming from the property boom, but that is an inhibitor, if you want, to the businesses. All of those are issues that, if you like, are shared by our companies as well as companies in the rest of the economy. But also, as we got involved in the discussions with the bank, we also realised that actually the Irish banking system was not fit for purpose for the modern exporting sector, the modern SME exporting sector in particular, and particularly in 3 respects. One, the Irish banking system had not actually become familiar with the modern technology economy. So software, for example, was a sector that Irish banks would have very little involvement in up to that period of time. And also medtech, clean tech, in other words, the new technology sectors would be areas that they were not familiar with. The second feature was is the area of new markets. So Irish banks would be lending to companies who are exporting to the UK, and that was, you know, a reasonably common and a comfortable area, if you like, from a banking point of view. But once you went beyond the UK, and particularly once you went beyond the EU, that then became a more challenging banking question, if you like. And obviously in the recent years, where the Irish banks have reduced their overseas involvement, that has actually become an even more challenging issue. And thirdly, then there were certain products that are important to exporting companies, such as performance bonds, invoice discounting for software companies, and similar type of products that actually, again, the Irish banking system would not have been familiar with. So we have undertaken with the three primary banks in particular, but not exclusively, is a programme of work which involves, first of all, a number of workshops with them in terms of educating them about the kind of companies we work with, introducing them to various groups of companies, the Irish Software Association, the IMDA and MedTech Association, and so on. Second of all, working with them and encouraging them to take on people who actually have experience in these areas. For example, in AIB, the Emerging Sectors team is a product of that, where they've taken on 5 or 6 people who have actually worked in software, VC, and so on. On new markets, what we have been working with the 3 banks is encouraging them to get involved in our trade missions. So on some of the missions to China, for example, there have been representatives from the banks. They've also, for the last number of years now, participated in our International Markets Week, where they have stalls, and the companies can meet them and talk about the financing issues that they have as they are meeting our colleagues from overseas about particular entry into new markets and so on. And last but by no means least, and particularly the question that you asked around facilities, we have been working with them on encouraging them to think about particular new facilities that they might be able to offer innovative and exporting companies. An example of this is the AIB have recently got a risk-sharing facility for the European Investment Bank for up to 80 million, and that is particularly aimed at innovative companies in the new sectors, as it were. And that for us is a very positive and heartening development. We are engaged with particularly the 2 pillar banks in discussions around how they can use the recently introduced loan guarantee scheme to underpin the kind of offers that they might want to offer the kind of companies that we're working with. And yes, to say, I mean, that export working capital, you asked earlier as to, if you like, some of the issues, and export working capital remains a very major issue for our exporting companies as they go into new markets, as they try and root themselves in markets. Actually having an ability to offer flexible terms to new customers, to existing customers, actually being able to have enough money to spend on the sales force that they need to put into those countries. That's all hugely important, is still a major, in our view, constraint in terms of many companies, and is a gap, if you want, from the point of view of the kind of banking system that we have here. And we know that our companies are in competition with companies from other countries where they have more supportive banks on the one hand, and also government-backed risk sharing schemes. In Germany, the Export Credit Insurance Scheme, in the USA, the Export-Import Bank, and so forth, are all aspects that we think are particularly important, and we see it as a major priority for the agency, for our clients, and as an input into the Action Plan for Jobs 2013.
Okay, thanks, Mr. O'Donnell. That was a very enlightening answer, and I think an answer that that we probably needed to hear, because before your answer, I'd never heard before of our banks being so ill-equipped to actually, in terms of their knowledge, to actually deal with an export economy. And I think it's very helpful to have that acknowledged here today. And if you don't mind me asking, and if you don't wish to answer the question, it's okay, but is the situation improving in our banks since you've been dealing with them since 2008? How do you find it now compared to then?
I think, in fairness, progress has been made. I think there's a much greater awareness, particularly at the centre of the banks, of the issue and indeed the opportunity. This is a major opportunity for our Irish banks, and I think, in fairness, there's been through the central contact and liaison teams, if you like, that have been established in the banks, and also at a very senior level. Our CEO meets with the CEO of all three major banks on a regular 6-monthly basis, and that has, if you like, helped stimulate and push forward the agenda. So yes, I think there has been progress, but there is certainly, and I think this will be a shared view amongst everybody, clients, banks and ourselves, there's a lot of ground to be made up. We're still certainly not where we need to be from the broader point of view of being a small, open, exporting economy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.